welcome to Fulhamish podcast. My name is Sammy James. This is your seminal soundbite for everything to do with Fulham FC. Joining me in the studio, Farrell Monk is here.
Good evening, Sammy.
Ben Jarman's here.
Good evening. Alliteration 10 out of 10 tonight.
Thank you very much. And Jack Collins is present.
Hello, everyone.
So we've got loads to get through on tonight's podcast. We'll have a look back at Saturday's feisty derby match at Loftus Road. We'll have a transfer update that isn't all about Ross McCormack, wherever he is at the moment. And we'll discuss Fulham's underrated heroes. No, not us. Although I was very tempted to throw our names into the hat. And we'll also be answering your questions too at the end of the podcast. Quickly, a little bit of admin from me. If you're an Instagrammer, you're on Instagram, please give us a follow at Fulhamish Pod. We've just got ourselves an account. Farrell is on it right this second. We're currently on 40 followers. It'd be nice.
I'm blocking.
Right, okay. It would be nice to reach 3 figures, maybe by the end of the week. Let's stay realistic about this. Jack, do you reckon that's possible?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
So let's look into the derby. Now the admin is out the way. QPR versus Fulham, the lunchtime kickoff on Saturday. I thought it was a classic London derby, a fiery game with loads of passion on display, just sadly lacking that little bit in quality. It was a game that suited QPR's style far more than our own. Jack, I'll start with you. Were you disappointed with the result, or did you think a draw was a fair result in the end?
I think before the game, I thought we needed 3 points from it, but actually coming out at the end, I was reasonably happy with the point because I don't think we were very good. I don't think they were very good either, in fairness, but I thought they probably had slightly the edge on the better chances. And it seemed to get to us as an occasion more than it did to them, I think. We were like quite sloppy, which is very, very rogue for us. And I don't think we rose to it in the way that, you know, there was a lot of talk beforehand about rising to the occasion and becoming, you know, and being clever with it. And I think that we got sucked into the game a little bit much. But, you know, at the end of the day, I spoke to a couple of Rangers fans afterwards and they said they were lucky to get a point. And I thought our parts, we were lucky to get a point. So, you know, maybe shares even, spoils even, fair.
Ben, you were at the game with myself on Saturday. It was an electric atmosphere at the game, but really it wasn't suited to Fulham's style of play, was it? The way that QPR hassled and harried us for the 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think you're right. It didn't suit us at all, and they were very, very good at disrupting our flow. They were very good at keeping our lines very far apart, making the passes really hard to connect with other people, or other players, should I say. And yeah, I think they just gave us a really tough time. They left a lot on Kearney and a lot on Aluko, in particular, because they obviously identified them as our main threats. But they held their positions incredibly well and put us under a lot of pressure, somewhere that we're not normally used to coming up against. And I think, it was just something that we didn't really like. They threw us out of our rhythm a lot.
But Farrell, just because a team doesn't suit our style of play is not an excuse for not getting 3 points. I guess if Fulham want to progress and break into the top 6, which we all know the club has aspirations to do, they're going to have to find a way to get past sides that don't play pretty football, that hassle and harry and, you know, are kicking us to pieces for the entire match.
Well, maybe it's a massive learning curve for us because this is probably the first time we've come up against a team since we've been a solid team this season that will harry us for the 90 minutes and really, really hassle us and really put us off our game, because a lot of for long periods of that game, although we did have a lot of the ball, we weren't playing as well as we should have done. There was a lot of passes that were cut out well by QPR, and, you know, you got to hold your hands up. Well done to them for defending it. But there was a lot of passes that went astray when they definitely should have done. I'm talking 5-10 yard passes, not under pressure, that just fell directly to a QPR defender. And they obviously knocked our rhythm a bit. And perhaps if we are going to challenge for the top 6, that we need to iron out those and get used to teams like that a better team would take advantage of.
So I threw it out to Twitter on Saturday evening and I said, should we debate the penalty, or not the giving of the penalty? I guess we'll come on to that, but the fact that Fulham yet again have missed a penalty. I thank you to David on Twitter that has worked out 71% of penalties have been missed by Fulham this season. But it was a brilliant run by Aluko. Not that much contact. Did you think it was a bit of a soft penalty, Jack?
I don't even think it's soft. I think it's a dive. Like straight up is a dive. And if that had been given against us, I said this with the Barnsley game, if that had been given against us, I'd be absolutely fuming. And I think they have a point to say that it wasn't a penalty. It's a good save. That's what
Yeah.
it's a good save. The penalty's low and hard and in the corner. And I think the Sky Sports Twitter feed posted saying, if you put your penalties in the corner, they go in, unless Alex Smithies is in goal. He's saved 6 from 10 this season. And what I'm going to term it, after Ben's statistics earlier in the season about Jan Oblak, the Oblak effect, where Smithies has just started to get into opposition's heads. And they made a point of pointing out he'd saved 5 of 9, and then now it's 6 in 10. So, there's that, and it's a good save. And I think that realistically, justice was probably done in that aspect.
Ben, do you think it's a dive? He's running at full tilt. Any knock can sometimes send a player over.
Yeah, I think it is. There is contact there. I think I might counter you there, Jack. Like, I looked it back on the match action today, and it looks like there is a bit of contact there, although minimal. And I think you can draw some comparisons with the Jerome penalty that was given against us in the Norwich game. You can also see some similarities, although it wasn't quite as blatant as the Raheem Sterling incident this weekend with Kyle Walker pushing him in the back. I felt like there was a slight push on Aluko. That's probably why he went down. And then on the penalty save, I think it was a brilliant save. And like you said about Smithies, like his record's second to none. But then in the wider context, according to a stat that I saw this week, 77% of all penalties in football go in. So obviously 23% missed. That in our small sample of this season is just not ringing true, but obviously shows that over the years there is more and more chance of you missing a penalty. As obviously goalkeepers get bigger, they get leaner, they get more technically sound. So I think it's something we need to work on, especially in training.
I mean, we'll move on from the penalty because I did promise that we wouldn't dwell on it too much, and hopefully we'll try and improve that record this season. I mean, I think it's almost impossible to get above 50% unless we really start getting a lot of penalties now. But anyway, Slav spoke in the week about Farrell, about creating identity within this Fulham team. That's something that we've alluded to several times on the podcast. I know Ben's brought it up a lot of times. However, it wasn't really on display on Saturday. What was it about the game that denied Fulham that rhythm? Or were Fulham to blame as much as Queen's Park Rangers stopped us?
Well, you would think that because it was such a lively atmosphere and a really kind of exciting match, like even the quality wasn't huge, that because of the occasion that it was quite an exciting match. You would think, considering going back to the Brentford game where it's similar circumstances, that the occasion wouldn't get to Fulham, but it just seemed to that day. And there were just a few misplaced passes and whatnot. But I do think that even when we weren't playing at our best, you can see what Fulham were all about. Possession football, attacking football. Even when things weren't going our way, some teams would sort of go, right, let's get our foot on the ball. Let's just try and control possession wherever it is on the pitch. Just get a good passing sequence together. It wasn't that. Fulham, whenever they got the ball, regardless of what our confidence was like in any of the players and whether we had actually got any chances recently, as soon as we get the ball, direct, straight to goal. Let's get goal. Let's attack them. The Scott Malone interview straight after the game, he basically came out and said in no uncertain terms that there was only one team looking to win the game today. And there was one team that really wanted just to get the point, because every time QPR got the ball, which was very rare, they tried to counter a little bit, but they were quite negative a lot. Whereas Fulham, straight to the goal. There's our identity. What we want to do, we want to get goals. We want to hassle teams. We want to get on top of them as much as possible.
Yeah, naturally, as a Fulham fan, I'm going to agree with what you're saying and what Malone is saying, but I think there are certain factors within the game and the way that QPR set up that basically allowed us to be putty in their hands in certain situations. And Sammy, you'll know this because I sat next to you for the whole game, basically screaming, can we be positive? And there are points when QPR are literally sat up, Johansson or McDonald have dropped deep to go and get the ball, and all it does is just force them upon us. It means that, if anything, our lines are elongated, it's much more difficult to connect with passes, and it looks like our threat was completely diminished. Only until the point where QPR sort of started to tire did I really think that we were able to push on and create those little sequences, and that was only in towards the last 20 minutes where the way they'd pressed and held their positions and then obviously as a compact unit and then tried to press us, that was the point where they started to become a bit tired, and that's where we found our openings. But I wholly agree, like we have got an identity. It's just that this time the way that QPR set up made made us play negatively. And I think the way we can see that translated the best is through Fredericks, who didn't attack the whole 45 minutes he was on. But when we did get that last 20 minutes, when we were getting our foot on the ball, and it allowed us to actually, take a rest, because when we got it back to counter, we had that energy there. And you're right, QPR never let us settle in the first 20 seconds. They already had a shot at goal and made Callas look very erratic, which is out of nature for him.
You mentioned Ryan Fredericks. Jack, he had a fairly poor first half. He's been on fire for us, really, in the last couple of months or so. What do you think it was that Ryan struggled with? Was it Jake Bidwell's very high pressing? Jake Bidwell's basically sat on the halfway line for much of the game. Or did Ryan find Loftus Road's tight pitch quite tough to deal with because he just didn't have so much space to run into?
Perhaps. I think that Holloway, much as I really dislike the man and don't like complimenting him, got it spot on in terms of playing the two high fullbacks. It shackled Malone and Fredericks, and Fredericks especially didn't like it and lost his head. And realistically, I think it was actually probably the right decision to sub him, because I was pretty sure he was going to get sent off. I thought he might get sent off before the end of the first half, if I was honest. And basically what happened, they targeted our key areas and the way we like to spread the ball. And then what happened was we started to panic on it in midfield because the options we always have weren't available. And then we make sloppy passes and sloppy decisions. And then it stopped the dynamism of playing, meaning we played a lot longer than usual. We played a lot of long balls to Martin, and our three behind weren't used to having to cover that much ground to make up for it. And as we've discussed before about Kearney not making up ground between, unless he's on the ball. And I think that the reason that Aluko maybe, he didn't have his best game, but probably looked good to the, your average bystander, was that because he was the only one getting up in support of Martin and then getting back to pick up the ball. And I think that if you look at how deep Kearney was coming to pick up the ball on the edge of our own box, it was kind of, what can you do from there? Because, when he's penned in there, he's not making those sort of small, intricate passes, even though, we looked assured mostly still on the ball. And it just meant that we weren't able to play the kind of neat passing game that we're so used to and let players expand. So I think there's a combination of lots of factors, but also mainly Holloway getting it spot on and us failing to break it down.
I've got to agree with that. I think you've nailed it there. And one thing I thought about whilst you were making that point is that not only are we known for our passing, but how good we are at carrying the ball. Like that front three, like you mentioned, that you're not used to them covering that amount of space. But in actual fact, they do, but it's just with the ball. And this weekend it didn't happen. Yeah.
Kenny reminds me a lot of the way he plays reminds me a lot of Dembele, the first one. The way that he'll sort of have his back to goal or facing goal with the ball, and even though he's a very left-footed player, you actually don't know which way he's going to take it round you. And he's not supremely quick, but over those 2 yards or just moving it just before the defender's going to get it, he's away from you, and that's where Kenny's really good. But not picking the ball up at the edge of our own area.
Started to look for the kind of Gerrard role, what he used to do and split the centre backs, and I don't think that's where Tom Kearney's effective, because what that means is the ball has to almost go long because there's no one in. And I think you look at someone like Steph Joe, who's obviously so industrious, and a lot of the QPR fans I heard a few saying as they walked out the ground, God, their number 14 was a bit special, wasn't he? And I thought Steph Joe had quite a poor game.
Yeah, I thought he was
so.
Well, not terrible.
I didn't think he was terrible.
Yeah,
that's a little bit of an over-exaggeration.
He's been so good.
Don't swear live on. Don't swear on the airwaves. But it was, I didn't think he had that good a game, and yet he was still. They were like, he always wanted the ball. He was always trying to find the pass, and I think that you've got to commend that, even when it's not working. I suppose that's what it is. There was no real plan B.
But we covered it earlier on in the season that when we do get frustrated, the whole system kind of falls down quite a lot. And then players start going way out of position more than they should do. And you picked up on it perfectly that Fredericks got frustrated so early on in the game that it kind of ruined his game. And the only point he got forward was when he got booked, because he lost the ball for a throw-in, got frustrated, had a go at the referee, and got booked for dissent. And that was in the 35th minute, which is crazy, considering we weren't losing at the time, I don't think. So why is he getting so frustrated? It's because we weren't massively on top.
Kenny and Steph Joe and K-Mac trying to split those defenders, for me, it's just a big no-no. If you've got a team that are just going to sit there and hold a position, surely it should be your centre-back's job to bring it out and to push everyone on and push that team back and to open up those gaps. And we didn't see that nearly enough. I can only remember Callas doing it on a handful of occasions. I don't think Ream done it, but I thought Ream was brilliant.
It was hugely infuriating, though, to watch Steph Joe and K-Mac go right to David Button. So David Button was on the edge of the penalty box, just by the D, and just literally like rolling it under his arm about 2 feet to one of Steph Joe or K-Mac. And especially Steph Joe, you're thinking, Button can do that. Button can hold the ball and make a pass. You don't need to be there. Go 10 yards up the pitch and get us kicked on a bit. I love playing from the back, but it seems a bit crazy. Let's have a quick look at the goals. Now, the first one for Queen's Park Rangers. Obviously, the missed penalty was a key turning point, and this was the other big key turning point in the match. A rare mistake from K-Mac. I literally said the words to Ben, I just love how composed Kevin McDonald is. And then he did that pass straight into the path of Ryan Manning. David Button didn't know whether to stay or to go. In the end, he kind of just dallied around in the middle. I'm not saying it was really David Button's fault. And a good finish from Ryan Manning. His first goal, the Irish under-23 international, sent Queen's Park Rangers fans into raptures. Is there anything worse than that goal music?
Oh, no. Oh, actually, there is. There's the other goal music that they play everywhere else in League One.
What? Da-na-na.
Yeah, that's the worst. That's the mark of a Tin Pot club. I've decided that if you play that tune after a goal, you can't be in the Premiership. You're not allowed. Like, I think they should ban teams who play that after a goal.
When we went down to the Championship, it shocked me how many teams had goal music. But I think that particular piece of music should be resigned to League Two, let alone Championship.
At least the QPR one kind of has their own, spin on it. That's the only saving grace I have for it.
I mean, then again, Fulham did have Hey Baby for several years, which was terrible.
Yeah, awful. Really glad that's stopped.
But we all sang it when we scored, though.
Well, you do, because you join in, and what else? You can't be the party pooper not joining in, but it is highly infuriating. And a rare mistake from K-Mac. I'm sure we'll have to go several matches again before K-Mac makes a similar mistake. Fingers crossed, touching wood, if there's any near me.
Yeah, I think he's been good recently, which is why it's a mistake. It's why a mistake like that stands out so much, I suppose. And the problem with me for K-Mac's one was that he made the mistake, and then he sort of tried to blame everyone else, and I was a bit like, "There's no one going to take the hit for you there, my friend. Like, you've really done that." It was a good finish, I thought, to not make the keeper. I thought that was brave, actually, from young Ryan Manning, who does look quite an accomplished midfielder and wouldn't look out of place in a Fulham midfield, I'd argue. Very comfortable on the ball, I thought.
He's only just broken into the team.
He's very young, yeah. We should have him. Let's have him. Nothing to do with the fact that he's an Irish under-23 international, I promise.
Oh, from the homeland. And then later in the match, it was towards the last 15 minutes, a rare shot from Tom Kearney. There's so many times you just want him to shoot rather than take that extra pass. He did shoot, bit on instinct, and then a fantastic little flick from Chris Martin to send the school end scenes in the school end, must I say. I nearly broke Ben's back in the process of celebrating that one.
Yeah, you did.
All right, we don't want to know what you do in your spare time.
Nicely done. Yeah. Yeah, you do sort of wish Kenny would shoot a bit more, wouldn't you? He's got a pretty good left foot on him. And,
well, it just wreaks havoc, like...
I mean,
he did hit a really good howitzer in the first half.
Yeah, and there was a really good save. I don't think that save gets enough credit.
Also, I think they gave a goal kick.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did.
Very angry. Yeah, great finish from Chris Martin. Though, like we've just sort of skipped over that. It's an unbelievable finish, in fact, to just sort of pick up on that and be like, oh, there you go.
After that first spell of pressure where we had corner after corner and we were really breaking down their lines then, that was when it came. And if we had done that maybe 30 minutes earlier, we could have easily had the points. But alas, QPR played quite well.
What was quite annoying watching it was the amount of times we got into really good positions where it'd be 3-on-3 and we wasted it a lot, where we were sort of getting it into the middle. Yeah. And it just wasn't... Our decision-making wasn't quite there. Usually, at the time, we're not really kind of punishing teams as much as we should do, but we weren't even creating chances from those kind of things. No. Moves were breaking down quite a lot, which is quite uncharacteristic from us.
Yeah, we often create chances and waste them, but we didn't really create that much. I thought the introduction of Ryan Sessegnon was a bit of an odd one. I wasn't sure what he was trying to achieve at that point.
I think this shows that now we have players going away to AFCON, that is our lack of strength in depth in that kind of position.
Yeah, we touched on that last week, didn't we, about our lack of strength in depth. We've got on the bench we had Cess, Maddle, and Sigurdsson, 3 defenders. We've got a goalie. That's 4 subs. We've only got
And Odoi.
And Odoi, and we've only got 7. And the other one's Parker and Smith. So we've only got 1 real attacking option there.
Yeah,
we need some wingers.
It's not like but it's also like, we called George Williams from loan, and I thought the whole point of that was to cover the sort of like lack of options. And you've made a point before of saying that Slavs has a record of putting defenders on the bench and having his bench as kind of sort of defensive cover for who he deems his first team to be. But you really do want some sort of attacking option to have there at that point, when, especially because we were on top and we were sort of looking to go on and win it, and all we could do was bring on a left back up top, and it seemed a bit nuts. Like,
he was playing right wing for a few.
Cess did okay, to be honest.
Yeah, I think he did as well.
He did develop one of the weirdest moves I've ever seen on a football pitch, where he drove into the opposition area, and then instead of doing a step over anything, he just sort of wobbled, and then the defender cleared the ball, and I was like, that's one of the oddest things I've ever seen.
Can you do a demonstration for me?
Wobble. Indeed, but yeah. There we are.
That's how Jack impresses the ladies on a night out. So at the end, after Chris Martin's goal... Oh, sorry, I'm not talking to my microphone. So at the end, it was a very end-to-end game after Chris Martin's goal. Lots of tempers flaring, including a huge scuffle on the touchline. Fulham seemed to rise to the bait a little bit, and it upset our attacking rhythm. I mean, you can hardly blame them, though, after being kicked to shreds for 90 minutes. Tom Kearney, in particular, just lost his head towards the end. And who was it he shoved over?
Ryan Manning.
After a horrible little kick out at Steph, actually. Yeah. And bear in mind, Manning was on a booking. And there was a lot of chat on BBC Sport about should Kearney have been, sent off, possibly. But if he had been, I think maybe Manning should have been for the second yellow. And also, I think if he'd sent Kearney off, he would have had to send everyone off, because it all went a bit... nuts after that.
There was the one in the dugout which was quite a lot of fuss over nothing. It seemed to start from just a small foul, and then all of a sudden the bench were all getting involved. Physios and scouts no one's ever heard of were getting involved. I don't know what.
Did the QPR assistant manager spit at one of our players?
He spat at Jokanovic.
Did he?
Yeah. Apparently, well, I mean, I didn't see
it.
Spit
at someone. I wouldn't do it, Slavica.
That's why he got sent to the stands. He spat. So that was the reason he got sent off. But it was all a bit mad.
It looked like he threw a punch. That's what I thought I saw.
Well, I tried to find a video online earlier, and I can't find anything. And it wasn't in the match highlights either. So
maybe they're hushing it.
Obviously, being there, we couldn't see everything, could we?
No, there was a brilliant in the moment of chaos where all the players were fighting towards the end. This was after Tom Kearney's push, where there's 21 players all in the middle, pushing and shoving each other, and Steph Joe's just to the side of the shot doing up his laces.
Yeah.
Doesn't care.
No, I
do not to get involved in this fighting.
I really like the Chris Martin struggle with Joel Lynch, where it was fully hands around each other's necks. They both got booked. But I really enjoyed the fact that we put our key battle before the game as Chris Martin v Joel Lynch, and that wasn't quite what I was envisioning.
It was almost like a pro wrestling grapple, wasn't it?
They were never going to hurt each other because they had each other so tightly locked that it was like one of those. But I like the passion in that, and I don't mind it. I know it upset our attacking flow, and it obviously wasn't good for the way we did. But especially with someone like Chris Martin, who's obviously not been in the fans' good books in recent weeks, to one, score and fully come and celebrate in front of the fans, and two, to then be so quick in when Kearney was, in trouble and right in the heart of it, for me is not the worst thing in the world. I think that it's a little bit of heart and a little bit of desire, and people are always talking about players that want to fight for the shirt. You know what?
Yeah. It seems to be the first year for a long time I feel like there's a real whole team spirit.
Yeah, we spoke about that mentality a few times, haven't we? The togetherness of the squad is something we haven't seen for years. And that's really, really positive to see. And the players been positive, the way we've got ourselves out of certain situations, coming from behind to win and win comfortably as well, just shows how much they believe in each other and how much the mentality is there this year.
Yeah.
So we've spoken lots on the podcast about Fulham's lack of consistency, and I guess it proved again on Saturday. We just can't seem to put together a run of wins. We had the win against Barnsley and another draw, and Fulham's form in the past 8 has been draw, win, loss, win, draw, win, draw, win. Now we're not quite as inconsistent as Ipswich Town. Do you know the stat about Ipswich?
They haven't put together 2 series of results for 22 games or something like that.
Something like that.
Really?
They haven't had 2 consecutive losses, draws or wins all season long, I think, or maybe since the very start.
The first 2 games they drew both, and then since then it's been all up in the air.
Yeah, they want to go back to the days of consistency of 2 draws in a row.
Yeah.
You know you're in trouble at that point, don't you?
So we're not quite Ipswich Town, but certainly we're struggling to put together this run of wins, and we're not having a run of draws or run of losses either. It just seemed to be switching results every game. But I made this point on Twitter afterwards, that those 8 games have resulted in 15 points, just 1 defeat in those 8. Now, generally, the points regarded as needed for the playoffs is around 75. That would have been enough for you last season. In fact, I think that would have got you 5th last season. And majority of the seasons, recently, 75 has been enough. Now, this form over 20 games, despite it being not very consistent, just draw, win, draw, win, draw, win with the odd loss, would give us 80 points. So the question I throw out to Twitter, and I'll throw out to you now first, do we need consistency?
I'm in the camp of yes, because this year the quality of the top 6, 7, 8 teams, all the way down to probably about 10, is much deeper than it was last year. I think we're finally starting to see all that television money coming down into the Championship as well now, and players and clubs have got players that are far-reaching where they should be able to recruit. I think Sheffield Wednesday is a really good example of that, because they've got a squad that's full of talent. Has got some talent that should be in the Premier League. And obviously you've got Newcastle, we've got Norwich. We need that consistency. If we can put together some good wins now, then we should be okay, and we give ourselves a nice buffer.
Yeah, Charlie Johnson on Twitter agrees with you. He says we need to cash in the next 6 weeks on easier fixtures, Reading apart, as we have a tough run, and we do actually have a very tough run. And
really
April
tough.
is a particularly big month. So, Jack, are you in agreement that you need to cash your chips now, basically?
Alex Bishop is fully in agreement. He says we need a few wins in a row to give us some breathing space just in case we drop points, open brackets, which we will. So I like the optimism there from Mr. Bishop. But there's a point. I don't mind win, draw, though, because 2 points on average a game with the things would take us comfortably into territory.
Yeah.
So I think the difference in consistency, I don't necessarily think we need to win 6 games in a row if we're not going to lose any. That's it. I think if the consistency means not losing, then I agree that we need consistency. We need to be not losing more than 3-4 games from here to the end of the season, and we'll make the playoffs. I think it's as simple as that.
I just think as long as we get 80 points at the end of the season, that'll be fine with me, regardless of
how we do it.
Yeah,
it's true.
I don't mind 20 wins in a row and then 10 losses, as long as we get the amount of points.
20 wins in a row would be something pretty damn special. So next up, in order to try and start those 20 wins in a row, we face Reading at the Medeski. So we're recording this on Monday evening. So by the time you're listening to this, it may have already happened. So we're having to look ahead to this and look into the future. So apologies if you're listening later on in the week. But it's a very, very important game. So if we're to stay in touch with the playoffs, a win would leave us just 2 points behind 6th, 3 points behind Reading. Jordan Abita is suspended. It's going to be quite a different game to the one we saw on Saturday, Farrell.
Yeah, very different game. I think Reading are going to be far more prepared for us than they were when we faced them the first time, and pretty much the second time, because it wasn't even that long after we faced them the first time. And Yapstam is going to really get into them to try and control the game a bit more. He mentioned it quite a lot at their game against Derby, although they lost it, that he felt that they controlled the game for a lot against a really good Derby team, but he actually mentioned that we need to control it more if we are going to beat Fulham. So I think they are going to be really, really prepared for us this time, especially if they've faced us 2.5 times already.
Yeah, exactly. Where was I going to go from here? They certainly... Sorry, I was going to say Ben. But Reading is certainly up for the taking. I don't know if you saw the highlights of the Derby game from Saturday, but a couple of their goals were real defensive horror shows, particularly the second one, which was intercepted by Will Hughes after them trying to play out the back.
Yeah, I think we look at that game and then a couple more. So if we give ourselves a good sample for what we could be coming up against in Reading, I think their tie in the FA Cup against Manchester United was a real good way for Stam to be like, this is the identity of the team and this is how we're going to play, and it was much too open for them. And I feel like they were very open against us, and when we played them in the fog, although you couldn't see much of it. I feel like in recent times they've become, rather than being the controlling force that they were at the start of the season where they held possession a lot, they've now tried to become too much of a purist to where they're trying to play football everywhere on the pitch, and that can leave them open to counters and to high pressing and stuff like that. And if they're not going to be good to play through the press, then leaves them in danger. But I think we can take it. I think they'll be a lot more open, a lot more expansive than QPR certainly were. And I think we're good at playing through a press, and I think we're good at taking our chances on a good day. And I also like the way Jordan Beatty's got himself suspended, so he doesn't have to get done by Ryan Fredericks for the third game in a row.
It was such a petty second yellow from Jordan Abita. He just looked at it in his mind, the way he kind of just like half pushed over Will Hughes in the 92nd minute, just thinking, I'm going to get out of Tuesday night.
I just don't fancy it. I think Ben's spot on. I think you're going to see, you hope that Reading are going to try and play their game, which is going to suit us down to the ground. You know, you hope and pray, because, you know, it's not going to be that kind of shut up shop, kick lumps out of your players that QPR tried. You'd hope that, you know, and everyone obviously wants to see an expansive, free-flowing game of football. That's, you know, how the game is played. And I think the Reading game is more of a, you know, if we're going to play this kind of style of football and they are too, then it's almost like the best team wins. And, you know, on the back of the result back in December and the way we played in the fog the first time, you'd hope that the best team would be us, and you'd hope that also that kind of game will allow us to get back in our stride, allow players like Steph and Kev to look at, you know, to get the ball down on the deck and play proper football again, and look to actually put Saturday out of their mind and get us back into stride and into form.
It's so funny. We did touch on this earlier on the season when form wasn't going so well, that we seem to struggle against some worse teams than us. We do seem to play better against better teams, don't we? We're not the way that kind of England seem to be, and when we play crap teams, that we just can't seem to break them down. And Fulham at the earliest part of the season, we just couldn't break down teams like Burton. We couldn't break down teams like Blackburn very well, although we won that game.
Wigan.
And Wigan as well. But then when we played Reading the first time and Huddersfield the first time, it was just absolutely tore them apart, and they're good footballing teams.
It'll be an interesting game tomorrow at the Medeski, and then on the Sunday we face Hull in the FA Cup, a 12:30 Sunday kickoff. Fulham seem destined to not play at 3:00 on the Saturday if we're going to make it to the FA Cup final. You imagine that Slav will drop one or two players for that, with an eye on Wednesday's game up at Burton, you'd have thought.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to give some of the lads a run out, and I'm sure we'll touch on it in our transfer section later. But especially some of those players that haven't got a game, if they're still around at the club, you look to get, you know, LVC, Humphreys. I'd love to see Georgie Williams and Dinaran again, and Parker. You know, it might be time for Scotty Parker to have another little maraud around in the midfield, because you know you don't expect him to be pushing anyone soon unless there's an injury for that place. So,
I'm sure when he starts, he'll still treat it as the World Cup final, though.
Exactly, you know, and I think that you could get away with putting a slightly youthful team out there and letting Scotty, you know, run that from midfield and try and get everyone G'd up for it. And I think that might, you know, actually work in our favour later on in the rounds. And even if it gets to the point where, you know, we get 2 rounds on and then we suddenly we're facing a decent cup run, and then you can bring players back into the side depending on where we are in the league at that point and what the situation is. So I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think I agree. Definitely agree with that. I think it would be nice to have Parker in there perhaps with LVC and trying to play the role of Johansson, because they're both quite strong runners, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think they could complement each other quite well. Yeah, I'd like to see some younger guys back in as well.
I really want to see George Williams. I really want to see George, because I think he is a talented footballer. He just needs a bit of game time. And we did bring him back from loan for one reason. I don't know what it is at the moment, but hopefully he's going to get some game time in.
And also, poor old Hull are probably going to have to send their under-16s.
They've got no players.
They haven't got any players. And poor Ryan Mason. Shout out to Ryan Mason.
Hope you're doing well soon, Ryan.
Yeah.
But yeah, you think that they don't have, they can't field a bench in the Premier League at the moment. As in, they've been playing benches with 5 people on them.
Yeah.
So, and they've got their EFL Cup game in the semi-final against Man United on Thursday, so they won't have much time to prepare for that game. But on the positive spin, I guess, for Fulham is that it's a very winnable game, albeit against a side in the division above.
Well, I watched this most of the second half against Chelsea Hull yesterday, and I was watching Hull, and you can tell that although they are bare bones, they do have some really talented footballers. They are a Premier League team. They're not there by accident. I still think they'll give us a very, very good game.
Yeah, I agree. They also seem very hard to break down. Like I've seen that in a couple of games now, and they don't roll over and they don't die, and I think the kind of backs to the wall attitude has kind of done them some favours in a way, because they don't look like that kind of very weak, very disjointed side that they might have seen at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think that mentality that you touched upon there is possibly what made Leicester, what drove Leicester to the title last year. And just to touch on Leicester's, on Hull's new manager, when he managed in Portugal, he took a team up from the second division into the first, then made them comfortably mid-table based on solidity throughout the whole of the team. And we're seeing that with Hull already. They already look much more solid than they did under Phelan, who, for someone that was Alex Ferguson's assistant manager for a very long time, didn't seem to carry over any of the traits that they showed when they were managing United, albeit the quality of players not any way the same. But you'd expect a couple of little bits. That's
a recurring feature.
It is.
Ferguson's assistants not actually being able to carry on Ferguson's work.
Yeah. Carlos Queiroz, there's another one from the past.
Didn't he go to Madrid and have an absolute nightmare?
Yeah, he failed and then went to Iran and took them to the World Cup.
Oh, fair play to him. Ashkan Dejaga's right foot, just absolutely leading Iran to a World Cup.
Still available on a free. Anyway, we're going to move on to talking about some transfer stories. Now, I'm never one that's a massive fan of debating gossip columns too much, and I imagine we'll come on next week to transfers in much more detail, and we'll have a much clearer idea of who's to come in and who's to go out. I mean, every transfer window now seems to be built around transfer deadline day, and that is when the vast majority of deals are done. But January seems to take that to a whole new level. And if there's a deal to be done, it's most likely to be done when there's a 3 in front of the date in January. But there's been lots of talk about one man in particular. We've already mentioned him on this podcast, so we won't go on too much. But Ross McCormack has been disciplined by Aston Villa and dropped after continually missing training, linked with ourselves, Leeds and Derby. But it looks like tonight some journalists out the West Midlands are saying that he's definitely not leaving Villa. So maybe time to put that one to bed. Unfortunately, looks like my armpit hairs are safe after I bet on our WhatsApp group that if he came, I would wax my armpits.
All 3 of your armpit hairs.
I know. I think it would be really painful, even with just 3 armpit hairs.
It'd be almost as painful as watching Ross McCormack come back to Fulham. I'm sorry, after we've had this Martin debacle and everyone was so quick to jump on his back, despite the fact that we didn't really know what was going on, we're now trying to sign a player who's gone on strike, like actually fully gone on strike. Have you heard Ross McCormack's excuse for why he's not been at training at Villa?
The gates.
He was up the electric gates and my Villa didn't open.
Maybe you can get through them.
Climb over, as in who designs a house with one gate? Yeah. Like it doesn't make any sense, and I'm not buying that for a second. Ross is a very special player and a very good footballer, but considering the fact that he doesn't want to fight from his place from the bench, which is kind of what I'd be wanting him to do if he did come back, I can't see that being a positive transfer for our camp.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to bring back a player, much as he was brilliant for Fulham, and I will, not hear bad words about what Ross McCormack did for the club, because I think that almost single-handedly he twice saved us from relegation, and I think that he was a wonderful servant, and he even though he had his contract disputes, he always came out and played, and he didn't go striking for Fulham, and he always came out and played well and led the team by example, but he's one of those players that if he's not the centre of attention, the focal point, he doesn't play. And it's just as simple as that. And I don't need him being the focal point anymore because we have that so spread around the team right now. And it's so nice to watch us have that kind of spirit. And what we were saying earlier about the fight, because, the players are fighting for each other. And they're one of those things. And you didn't really see that over the last 2 years. And I don't know how much of that has to do with Ross, but I can imagine it's a factor.
I think the fact that when Jokanovic got the bid in from Aston Villa, turned around and said to Ross, you want to go, you can go, and didn't really be like, Ross, you're staying, we need you next season, we need you to help us fight, is kind of an indication of how Jokanovic feels about the player. And right, like Jack said, he's basically saved us from relegation 2 seasons in a row. He's a very special player when he wants to be, and when he's fit enough to be. Right now, he's not fit, not in a team, and I'm not sure how he fits in with our current team. If you look at when people are posing the question on Twitter, where do you see Ross McCormack fitting in? A lot of people are saying are in place of Piazon, who's currently playing wide right. I can't see Ross filling there because
He played it a few times for Fulham, and
he's too slow. He's not fit enough, and I cannot see him fitting in with how fast we play and how quickly we smash through transitions anymore. But I know that may upset a few people because there are a lot of McCormack fans. But personally, I'm not.
someone that seems far more likely to come to Fulham, and this name has been linked continually with us throughout January, is standard Liège midfielder Ibrahima Cissé. Well, we've made a few transfers from Belgian sides in the summer. Dennis Adoy and... Was that the only one?
It was Adoy and Cabano joined us from a Belgian team as well.
Ghent.
It was Ghent.
A reported 2.2 million. Do we know much about Ibrahim Cissé and what he might bring to the team? Is that...
Yeah, I do a little bit.
Right.
So he's a centre defensive midfielder, originally from Ghana, I believe. He's 23, so not someone that we can come in and we have to wait a couple of years for him to be able to adjust. He's pretty big physically. He can hold his own in the defensive role. He's a pretty good passer, and I know that he's quite positive when he has the ball. So I don't know if he'll play in supplement to K-Mac or alongside Steph Joe. Well, I don't know how much of an impact he'll make on our first team, but he's a good player to have for defensive cover. He's very mobile compared to Scotty Parker, and obviously being young, there's always a chance that we'll be able to sell him on, which, as we've discussed in podcasts in the past, is like basically scoring a massive goal for us. Like, if we can sell him on for more than we bought him, that's perfect.
I think there's a part of it just looking to the future and just improving the squad because, you know, as much as I'd like Scott Parker to play forever and ever, it's probably his last year, isn't it, at Fulham or in football in total. So I think to have someone coming from abroad and to have Scott Parker as your sort of teacher in that kind of role, that's a pretty good one to have.
I think the one that suggests to me that Cissé might come, even though he did play for Standard a couple of days ago, and that's not something you necessarily do if someone's leaving, is that we got rid of Tunnicliffe. And I don't think that Slavisa would have done that.
That
A
hurt,
little
didn't
ode to Ryan Tunnicliffe. My man. I miss you already. It's very sad. And every time, you think of these goals against Bristol City, the performance in the Cup.
What was his squad number again? Because he hasn't played for that long. I've forgotten his squad number.
19.
RT19.
19. So 19th minute this Sunday. Should we all...
I think we should have a clap for Ryan Tunnicliffe, who was the most, I know we're going to come on to this, the most underrated servant of Fulham Football Club. Poor Ryan.
I liked Ryan Tunnicliffe. I mean, not
I
to
like
the
his
extent...
heart and his commitment.
Yeah. He had the Kasamis about him, like not the goal. I mean, just the way he's sort of... He's a good driver of the team. He can take a team forward.
A consummate professional, some would say.
Some. Jack Collins might.
No, but I think what the point... I wasn't actually going to go into Tunnicliffe now. I was going to save that for later. But, you set me up.
We're here now.
So, no, I don't think we would have got rid of Tunnicliffe without a defensive midfield cover coming in, because I think that if you lose either K-Mac or Steph Joe to injury... It's, we go back to that whole point about Parker and McDonald not being able to play together in the same axis, and we don't have adequate cover for that role now that Tunnicliffe's gone out on loan. I suppose we could recall him, but that seems a bit rogue. But
He'll just go on strike and won't come
Surely
back.
if he was in the plans, should that situation ever be there, then he would still be here.
which makes me think that there's someone
Absolutely.
coming in, because I don't think Slavisa would make that kind of decision on a whim.
Now, on to underrated Fulham heroes, leading us swiftly on.
There's a nice link there.
Yeah, exactly. Forever trying to find a good seg.
We're going to have to give Jack a minute, though, because he needs to wipe his tears away.
Oh, okay. Jack, would you like a donut, just to make you feel better?
No, I don't want to comfort eat. That sounds very Bridget Jones. What have you been doing since Ryan Tunnicliffe? Just eating Mars bars. Literally sat on my sofa crying and eating Haagen-Dazs with a spoon.
This was one brought up by Farrell. So Andy Johnson is now on Twitter. Andy Johnson.
Was that his song?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're Fulham fans, so creative.
So give him a follow at Andy Johnson 08. Now Farrell reckoned that Andy was one of his most underrated Fulham heroes. So we asked listeners for theirs. But first of all, I will open it to the table. Can we all bring an underrated Fulham hero to the fold? This is a little bit like revisiting some of the forgotten Fulham a little bit.
Andy Johnson, for me, was just a phenomenal footballer. I remember, and someone did say on Twitter, said that he was sort of a player that just took us to a new level. I remember that in his first game, it was someone pinged a ball over the top, and he was the first Fulham footballer I had seen. The ball was coming over his shoulder, and he was able just to take an actual touch rather than and it didn't go out of play, or it was actually intended. And that was the first time I was like, my God, we've actually got and he was an England footballer, and we haven't had like a consistent England footballer before that. So for me, he was just a phenomenal footballer, and it was unfortunate for him that it was in our best season ever. He had the horrible injury, which was from an absolute rugby tackle from some Russian unknown footballer against, it was for Amkar Perm, I think it was.
Amkar Perm, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I had two that I had to think about for other underrated heroes. From recent memory, one of them was Klaus Jensen, who was just the classiest footballer.
Yeah.
And he had a couple of injuries, so was in and out of the team for a bit. But whenever he played, he was just unreal. I was surprised when we got him from Charlton at the time for such a ridiculously low fee.
Could take a belter of a free kick as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful dead ball specialist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ben, any underrated Fulham heroes that sprung to mind when this question came up?
Yeah, I think my memory is considerably shorter than Farrell's, so I think I'll probably have to go for Big Dick himself, Dixon the Two Who.
That was going to be my
I thought you
one.
were talking about me.
Well, there you go.
Bloody hell.
Fucking hell.
Let's keep some decorum on this podcast, for God's sake.
Just smut today.
That was going to be my one as well, interestingly,
Dixon
Ben.
the Two Who, I thought he was a pretty good glue to a side in the early 10s, shall we say. Yeah, I thought he played some very good football, and for a technically quite limited player, he did play some very good football. He scored some good goals as well. And another one who I thought was really, really good during our Europa League days, but doesn't get too much love compared to likes of Gira, was Damien Duff, who I really enjoyed watching play, and I thought he was a majestic footballer even when he joined us so late in his career, and put in some brilliant shifts and scored some great goals.
Yeah. Even well into his 30s, he was absolutely roasting fullbacks.
And I don't know how he had the same move every game, shift it onto his left, whip it in, and no matter what flank he's on, the defender didn't realise what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
I just thought that was brilliant, and he'll always live in a memory of his little Copa Mondials whipping balls in. I like that one.
Jack?
I'm going to stick with the Irishman theme. Mine was Steve Finnan.
Yes.
The maybe probably the most accomplished player I've ever seen in a Fulham shirt. He just didn't. I can remember Steve Finnan having one bad game in all of the years he played, and it was against Man United at the Cottage, and it was Giggs in his prime, and Giggs gave him an absolute nightmare. But
Giggs scored a worldie that day.
Yeah, but it was also like Giggs was unplayable that day. It wasn't even like but Steve Finnan was the most just like Leal, just on the right wing, he just did bits every day. He was just there like, yeah, and you're not coming past me, and I'm going to whip in some good crosses, and it's just all going to be very comfortable. And I remember being very sort of, I could play right back. Steve Finnan made being a right back cool. Yeah. And that's something that no one does.
He got into the PFA Team of the Year in the first year of the Premier League, didn't he?
Yeah. I'm really pleased he went and won a Champions League medal, because he was actually a legend. And the other one who was same sort of era that never gets enough love was Alan Goma, who was literally one of the most assured centre-backs. And he had a series of awful partners. And it was like, Alan Goma,
football partners.
Alan Goma made that night look unbelievable. And it's like, he's like Callas. Like, he makes like average players look excellent. And I remember when Alan Goma left, being like, we're going to really struggle to replace him, because he was he was so assured on the ball. He didn't like make rash decisions. He was sort of just this no-nonsense French centre-back who wasn't having any of these skillful players trying to go past him. He just literally like block tackles and just stopping strikers. And you know what? Shouts out to the old guard. Yeah,
that kind of reminds me, and I didn't think of him before, but now I think of him, Sylvain Legwinski.
Yeah.
I would say that he was definitely underrated for his time. He had French caps to his name, but he was just a no-nonsense player, but incredibly skillful, tall, lanky, but popped up with the odd goal, and there was nothing of him that was completely stand out, but he was just an all-round good footballer.
I think at the time we really liked him. I think he's just been sort of a little bit forgotten to the ages because we had sort of Malbronk and Zaha. Like, I think that's probably the difference between them. At the time, he was definitely seen as a key man in the squad.
I will never forget that goal against Newcastle.
Newcastle.
The one against
Tottenham.
Spurs as well,
Oh, yeah,
for the 3-2, but that one against Newcastle. Coleman's first game at Loftus Road. Absolute belter.
Chris Coleman sweeping away that mop that he had on his head for the celebration. Just one more for the old timers, because it was sort of the first sort of exciting player I saw growing up in the promotion year from Division 3 that it doesn't really get mentioned at all, because from that season there was Mickey Conroy and Robbie Herrera, who were sort of the stars of the team. I'm doing inverted commas. But for me, going to a few games from when I was younger, there was a young, exciting winger called Paul Brooker, who was just, at the time, it was like, wow, this kid is going to be a superstar. And he played quite a lot in that promotion season, but doesn't really get the recognition that I think he deserves, because he was so exciting and so direct. He absolutely roasted defenders week in, week out in that season. But then we got promoted, and obviously the Al Fayed era started, and he kind of got frozen out of the team. He couldn't get in and was moved on and sort of wandered into journeyman status. He actually played in the Premier League a couple of times under Mickey Adams, which I don't think Fulham fans actually know.
A few from Twitter, just really quickly, that were also sent in. Ben Keenan said Aaron Hughes. I think Aaron Hughes is such an overrated, underrated Fulham hero, because I think he's one of the ones that people always go to because he was the kind of unspoken about heart of that amazing defence that was leading us through that European run. David Mitchell said Steve Finnan. It got quite a lot of likes in the comments. Said great servant and the best right back in the country at the time. Chris Parker said Moritz Volts. Karagounis gets a mention from Brendan, and lots of people saying Dixon Atuhu, which was my one before Ben.
Sorry, mate.
I like Kevin's Martin Jetu. I'm a big fan of that. So shouts out to you, Kevin. Kevsy McGee.
Patrice Thomas chose Lewis Holtby, who I loved watching in that 3 months he was at us.
I hated Magath for his treatment of Lewis Holtby and how he dropped him, because I think Lewis Holtby was one of the keys to us getting out that situation.
Well, they hated each other from their time at Hamburg.
They certainly. Lewis Holtby, when that news must have come in, must have just thought, oh,
for God's sake.
Brilliant. So we've just got time for one quick email from the listeners. We want to get more emails and questions from you guys. It's as much your show as it is ours, really. So there's numerous ways you can get in contact with us. Obviously, there's the normal ways, Twitter and Facebook. Loads of you getting in touch that way. If you want to send something a little bit longer, or maybe you're not on social media, you can't be bothered with the Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams of the world, you can always send us an email, and we do check them pretty regularly. Fulhamishpod@gmail.com. Now, we had a question from George Rossiter, friend of the podcast.
Friend, big fan.
And this is a great question that I thought I'd pose to you guys. If the EPL/EFL, Premier League or Football League, brought in a similar system to China, only 3 foreign players, who would you pick with our current squad? Belter of a question, George.
I'd have to go Callas, Johansson, and maybe another centre-back if we're not going to play signings. If there was signings involved, I'd pick Aite. But if not, you'd have to pick another centre-back, because we just don't have adequate cover to be able to play, the team we're doing. Unless, before we've loaned out Tunnicliffe, I might have put Kevin McDonald in at centre-back next to Tommy Callas.
We had to play there a few times because of sendings off.
But I would have, my very important thing was that you need to sign Charlie Mulgrew for my system to work, or Harry Maguire of Hull, who's like my new favourite Premier League player. Just a marauding Lewis Dunk-esque centre-back who just loves like forays into the opposition penalty box. He's gone mad. He's like Hull's best attacking threat outside of Robert Snodgrass.
He gets quite a lot of goals, doesn't he?
He just literally, it's not even like, you expect your centre-back to score headers and whatever. Harry Maguire wanders into the box from his own half. Like, he just goes on like these weird runs and just like shoots loads. It's really odd, but I really like him.
Ben, who would you go for?
I'm going based on the assumption that Sonny Aluko, who's declared for Nigeria, is actually being counted as a homegrown player, just simply because he's been here in England the whole time, the whole of his
see what you
career, obviously aside from his spell at Rangers. So I'm going to go for Tommy Callas, Steph Joe, and Aite, just purely based on the fact that if we did get rid of Maddle and Tim Ream, who, just on a side note, has been fantastic the last few games.
Yeah,
if we get rid of them, we could potentially get a couple of people in. And I quite like Courtney House from Wolves, and I said that in our WhatsApp group. And there's a couple of other guys I quite like, Lowton.
Matt Lowton
of Burnley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Matt Lowton?
Yeah, Matt Lowton.
Yeah.
I quite like him. He had quite a good game against Arsenal yesterday. But yeah, I think those would be my three guys. I think Callas is brilliant and will turn out to be a world beater one day.
Yeah.
Callas and Steph Joe both getting nods from Ben and Jack. Farrell, are you in agreement there?
Yeah, I've got Callas, Steph Joe, and Sean Kavanagh.
Oh my fucking God.
He's foreign. No, I'm kidding. I did put Aluko down before. I thought, nah, it's not. But I would go Aite as well. I think he obviously, in that first few games, he was really good and obviously fell out of favour for a little bit.
Ankle injury, not out of favour.
Yeah, sorry. But he did he came back and was kind of fell out of favour, but then he came back in the team and I thought he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant before he left for AFCON.
So we've come to the end of this week's podcast. Secretary Jack, please can we have a title for today's podcast as ever?
In homage to my departed, long-lost sadness of the leaving of Ryan Tunnicliffe, I think we're going to call this one And Here's to You. But I have had a thought about this, and I'm very surprised with our lack of originality and chance that no one has managed to adopt the And Here's to You Ryan Tunnicliffe into And Here's to You Ryan Fredericks just yet. Because, I mean, it's very simple, isn't it? And we're not very good at creating new songs. So, and also, why has Hi-Ho Steffi Hansen not caught on and everyone keeps singing the old Seven Nation Army?
Because he stopped scoring.
Yeah, but now they sing the Seven Nation Army song, which is rubbish.
Yeah.
I haven't got it to hand.
No, it's fine. You know, we're all grown ups here. We all know where it is, so we know how to find it.
Dom's not here. We can't embarrass him by making him sing it.
Oh yeah. Well, Jack, me and you are off to the Reading game tomorrow, so we will be trying to start And Here's to You Ryan Fredericks, and also singing Hi-Ho Steffi Hansen at the top of our voices. We'll be those nutters at the back that you're kind of tutting against.
We probably won't. We're quite small, polite lads.
Yeah, we are. We won't cause any trouble.
Come and say hello if you see us.
Yeah,
Gentleman Jim, that's the one who'll be going, who the hell are those knobs at the back of the
So, thank you once again for listening to this podcast. Please go share it. Please go follow us on Instagram, as I appealed for at the start of the podcast. And if you've got any questions or comments or anything you'd like to tell us, drop us an email, fulhamishpod@gmail.com. We'll be back next Monday as ever for another podcast. We'll be looking back at the important game at the Medeski Stadium on Tuesday night, plus also some reaction to our Sunday lunchtime kickoff against Hull in the fourth round of the FA Cup. So, chaps, once again, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you next week.
Take it easy.
Toodles.
See ya.